Good morning, Rogers High School. Welcome back to Season 2. We're going to call this Season 2 of Coach's Corner. We're opening up the 2020 school year in a much different manner. We are digitally learning. We're, students, staff, parents, we are all learning digitally. And we're trying to be the best we possibly can in this position. I've got with me Andrew Schwebke, chemistry teacher extraordinaire from Rogers High School, Coach Zentz, social studies, AP Gov, and then we have our fearless leader, Dr. Smith, with us down here, and we're here to talk about culturally responsive learning. It's kind of it's a tough topic to talk about in the sense that it's a continuously growing process. We're trying to address and reach every one of our students and give them the best we possibly can, but I'm not doing the explanation justice, so I'm going to have Mr. Schwebke up here give us the breakdown on what culturally responsive learning is.
So culturally responsive learning is really about getting to know your students really well as a teacher, finding out what their strengths are, their weaknesses, their backgrounds, and then building connections with them and using those connections to really leverage difficult academic work in the classroom. So it's first building a foundation of strong relationships, getting to know where our students are at, then secondly, using that to build academic skills. It's not just teaching the content, it's teaching how to learn the content. And so culturally responsive teaching combines the very best of both cognitive science, like how our brains actually work, with the very best of traditional teaching, which is connecting with kids, loving kids, building relationships. And so it marries the art and the science of teaching together in a really powerful way that I think benefits all students, no matter what curriculum they're studying.
Okay, so over the course of this educational journey, there has been really three forms, I guess, of culturally responsive, or it's kind of been an evolution of culturally responsive learning. You had your multicultural learning, which has been referenced as kind of it's a small world approach, where, hey, this exists, these people are there, they have these differences. And then you've got your social justice approach, where we're addressing injustice. You're saying these problems are out there, because you have, we discuss white privilege, right? Because you have this color skin, you're born in this neighborhood, you have these specific privileges, and it's not necessarily like, when we say privilege, it's not that you have something others don't, it's that you are afforded maybe the opportunity others are not because of the color of your skin or because of what neighborhood you were born in. So there's a lot there, and then it evolves into culturally responsive teaching, where we're building that capacity to learn, and we're trying to end poverty, not just escape poverty. So at this point, how do you put that into the classroom? We're going to start with Mr. Zentz, and we're going to look at how he, in a social studies classroom, tries to be culturally responsive.
Hey, I just wanted to thank you guys for inviting me. This is new to me as well, and as a person that believes in lifelong learning, I'm excited to get involved with this. Looking back at the way I teach and what I do in my classroom is something that I enjoy. I feel like it makes me grow as a person, and it puts me on that personal growth model that I encourage all kids to be a part of. And so, but for me personally in the classroom, the way I try to be culturally responsive in my teaching is to develop some level of trust and transparency with kids early on. And that takes time. It's not easy. And I do that through, some activities that we do, but also I do that through teaching. They need to know that I understand and I can try to address some of the plight that exists for them. Maybe it's that I know and understand the inequities by design that exists in society. And so from a social standpoint and social studies, that's what I do. And then they begin to then trust me more, and they feel like I'm more transparent. And then we can move on to actual learning. where they then trust that I'm in it for them, and we can add some rigor to the curriculum. Some teachers like to take students early on and say, this is how hard it is, and do all these notes and take all these tests, and your grade's bad and you need to work harder. I've always taken the opposite approach, and that is I've always tried to build on the first few units and make them very easy and intentionally easy, to draw kids in, to give them the ability to trust me, to know that when I start then turning up the heat and turning up the pressure in the class, giving them the real content and the real rigor, that they have me to support them. And I think that's culturally responsive teaching. I hope it is. That's what I do in the classroom.
So for me, I want to come back, Rambo, to what you first said about 3 different approaches in the classroom. And so the first one you mentioned is like multicultural education. And traditionally, that was the model when I started teaching in 97. And so it would be pointing out the contributions of different minority groups to science. And there's some wonderful contributions. And so sometimes you can look at a textbook and think, okay, I don't see examples of myself in that book. And so being explicit about that. So that was kind of the early model, and people really worked hard at that. And outcomes for kids didn't get any better. What we call the achievement gap, the difference between white students and minority students on graduation rates, test scores, those didn't change. Second approach would be what's called a social justice approach, and that's getting kids fired up and inspired to make a difference in their world, to see the inequities that are there. And Zentz was talking kind of about that approach, and really powerful. But if you're a chemistry teacher like I am, it's kind of hard to see how that's going to come into my curriculum. And so the third approach came out of the University of Washington right around 2008, 2009, called culturally responsive teaching. It was understanding that there are different cultures, prevalent cultures in our country, and that there are different ways that those cultures work. And as a teacher, understanding like these broad ways that culture works, and then leveraging those to make connections with my students in the classroom. I don't have to know every single thing about every type of student, but if I know that many cultures are much more socially interactive in the learning process, then I'm going to create in my classroom social learning opportunities. For me, that looks like groups. And I'm still trying to figure that piece out online, honestly. It's a whole different ballpark online. But in my classroom, brick and mortar school, there'd be groups. We'd be having discussions and interacting versus me just telling kids all the science that they need to know. And so, but again, I mentioned at the beginning that this is also married with brain science. So brain science or neuroscience has advanced a lot in the last 20 years, where we know now that kids really have to build their own understanding of a content area. I can't just tell them the right science. I've got to structure experiences where they do labs, where they're talking with each other and making sense of it, and then talking with me as a class. Those are the powerful experiences that actually help kids to learn. Now, final point, you got to have strong relationships with your students. Absolutely foundational for building a culturally responsive classroom. And so as a teacher, I try to connect with my kids, and I try to do that in every single way that I possibly can. And that becomes the foundation that I build and push students academically from. I believe that my kids aren't going to care how much I know until they know how much I care about them. And I care deeply for my students. It's why I'm here in the classroom and have made the choices in my educational career that I've made. So that's just in a nutshell how I kind of approach it in the classroom and how I see it fitting even in a chemistry classroom or a math classroom or a biology classroom. So there's some other avenues like Zentz talked about in social studies where you really can get into these social injustices, but they just don't necessarily come up in a chemistry room.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. You both you have such a great way of speaking and presenting the information, and I know you both have very strong relationships with your students, so it's and I understand why now. So thank you once again for sharing. Now, we're only a small part of the school. What is it, Mr. Smith, that as an administrator, we do these trainings and we learn about these things, culturally responsive teaching. What is it that you want to see your staff doing, or really, what is Rogers High School doing currently that tries to address this culturally responsive idea?
Thanks, Justin. And you're right. We've been doing training at Rogers every year that I've been here around biases, microaggressions, privilege, as you mentioned before. And those are all really important, intertwined with us looking at our data and understanding that there truly is an opportunity gap for our students of color, our students of poverty, and so forth. So I think, one, recognizing that we have an opportunity gap and that we need to do something about it is important. But I also think really for Rogers, it's us fundamentally understanding that, and I want all my teachers to understand this, is that in this game of life that we are all running, so to speak, the starting point for everybody is different, okay? Whether you are a male versus a female, the starting point in this race is different. If you are a person of color versus a non-person of color, the starting point is different. So acknowledging and understanding that the starting point is different, but yet at the same time realizing and having a fundamental belief that we can bring everybody up together with standards and rigor wrapped around relationships. And that's mentioned by both of these two phenomenal educators. We cannot do anything unless we wrap it around relationships, but understanding that with our rigor and whatnot, that we can begin to close this gap. But it is a fundamental understanding and an acknowledgement, and that comes first from within, that there are different starting points for all of us in this race of life. And so that's what we try to understand and work on here at Rogers.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I mean, everything that we're saying, in what we've read and what we've looked at, they keep presenting the African proverb, "I am because we are," right? And I think about that as I'm going about my day. I'm on my run and I'm thinking, what is really the application in what we're doing to that? And you go down any hallway at Rogers High School, it is about relationships, rigor as well, but we're pushing that relationship piece in the hopes that we can elevate the level of our classroom. The individual is nothing without the group. The it takes a village mentality is really, really how I connect that proverb. It's an honor to work with you, gentlemen, to get to talk about these kind of things and move forward with this training and this culturally responsive idea as a product of the Puyallup School District, and somebody who's going to have his kids. I got a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I imagine them going through this system. I just want it to continue to grow and continue to improve every day, every year, whatever that's going to look like. So thank you for doing this. And I know that it's not going to end here. We're going to continue to move and continue to grow and continue to build those relationships and push our students and elevate Rogers High School, Puyallup School District, the community to a bigger, stronger place. So thank you once again. Coach's Corner Season 2. Have a fantastic day. Digital learning. Fight on.